He appeared out of nowhere, a king with no father, no mother, and no past. Who was Melchizedek, and why did Jesus follow in his footsteps? In the Bible, there is a character who stands alone, unaffected by political and theological conventions. Have you ever heard about him? Melchizedek, the monarch without a family tree, has the ability to change your outlook on religion. Now you understand why this obscure figure bears the key to the millennial secrets that connect the Old and New Testaments. Melchizedek appears just briefly in the Bible, but his significance and ambiguity are outstanding. Even without a family tree or other background information, his appearance in the Bible makes a significant impact. His account questions the conventions established by the political and spiritual authority of his time. Melchizedek's interesting duality, a monarch and a priest, is unique among literary characters. We can't help but wonder about the profound implications contained in the scriptures in light of the enigma surrounding him. The fact that he appears out of nowhere and has no prior background knowledge adds to his mystique. When he first meets Abraham in Genesis, he emanates respect and secrecy. Their encounter takes place in a triumphant and joyful atmosphere. Melchizedek, King of Salem, offered Abraham food and wine after he won a big war, which is profoundly symbolic and goes beyond conventional hospitality. Melchizedek is barely mentioned briefly, but that does not diminish his importance. Instead, every reference of him bears weight and implies meaning that goes beyond what is said. Few biblical heroes can claim to be both King of Righteousness and King of Peace. These distinctions, which go beyond titles, reflect his personality and aim. Thus, Melchizedek is more than just a historical man. He represents an eternal priesthood and a set of higher principles. The mystery surrounding his origins piques the interest of Bible scholars and readers alike. In contrast to other characters, Melchizedek has no comprehensive genealogy in the Bible. This shines out in a text that emphasizes lineage and descent. The fact that he does not leave a family tree lends support to the belief that he is eternal and divine, as his presence transcends human traditions and time. The lack of definitive information about his origins and end further adds to the legend around him. Melchizedek differs from other biblical figures, both religious and secular, in that he is portrayed as an individual who is not linked with any particular group. Many people question what his priesthood includes because he is self-governing and does not belong to any recognized institution. This one-of-a-kindness signifies a greater power, a direct connection with God unmediated by material things. Melchizedek is a predecessor to subsequent theological notions due to his autonomy and close relationship with God. Because Jerusalem, the city that would play a crucial part in the spiritual and theological histories of many religions, is frequently mistaken for Salem. His title as King of Salem is equally significant. Melchizedek, the King of Salem, is associated not just with shalom, peace, but also with a location that would become a holy center. This link reinforces his one-of-a-kind reputation as a symbol of justice and peace, whose deeds and titles have stood the test of time. Melchizedek's tale includes depictions of godly interactions as well. Abraham, a famous patriarch, acknowledged his spiritual power by blessing him, making this verse one of the most important. In addition to being a symbolic act, this blessing confirms Abraham's mission and triumph, emphasizing the connection between people and the divine. Thus, Melchizedek serves as a mediator between the parties, conveying God's presence and confirming his promises through his actions. Melchizedek's offering of bread and wine to Abraham was rich in symbolism. These elements, reminiscent of Christ's Last Supper, are seen as symbols of spiritual and physical nourishment. Communion, represented by the breaking of bread and the drinking of wine, is an act that transcends cultures and time. It indicates that human and divine alliances are being strengthened and formed. Melchizedek forms a link with this seemingly little deed that has profound and long-lasting spiritual significance. Melchizedek and Jesus Christ are strongly linked in the New Testament, particularly in the letter to the Hebrews. Melchizedek is regarded here as a figure of Christ, highlighting the eternal and worldwide aspect of Jesus' priesthood. Drawing analogies to Christ allows us to better comprehend his purpose and character, while also elevating the role of Melchizedek. In the order of Melchizedek, the Melchizedek priesthood is regarded as superior to the Levitical priesthood due to its eternal nature and divine ordination. As a result, Melchizedek is an important figure in understanding the new covenant that Jesus established. Melchizedek reveals that true spiritual power is found in an individual's close contact with the divine, rather than in human traditions or lineages. As he demonstrates, spiritual power and justice are derived from a person's integrity and communion with God, rather than institutions. Melchizedek imparts a deep lesson on the meaning of leadership and service to God during his brief visit. The figure of Melchizedek allows us to reflect on the essence of royalty and priesthood. His dual function as king and priest, with no clear line of ancestry, serves as a potent symbol of the divine's legitimacy and holiness. This rare and significant combination implies a higher power with a goal that goes beyond human expectations. Even without a complete family tree, he is a timeless example of spiritual and moral leadership. Furthermore, the way Melchizedek is portrayed in later scriptures underscores his importance. He is mentioned again and expanded upon, especially in the New Testament scriptures, which give him much more prominence. Melchizedek's theological significance and profound influence are highlighted by his continued relevance throughout the Bible. He represents principles that transcend time and geography. Thus, he is more than just a historical character. The mysterious Melchizedek of the Bible also inspires us to reflect about and study the depths of faith and spirituality. The unknowable personifies the conundrum that urges us to continue our quest for celestial enlightenment. Melchizedek encourages us to ignore superficial things and obey the rules in order to gain a deeper and more meaningful understanding of our faith. He is a character that welcomes mystery and wonder, reminding us that not everything is meant to be understood, but rather that the pursuit of knowledge is a sacred journey in and of itself. As a last thought, Melchizedek evokes reverence and astonishment. His resemblance acts as a continual reminder of the Bible's diverse nature and the abundance of narrative it provides. Despite his seldom mention, he has had a deep and long-lasting impact. Melchizedek offers a timeless and ancient concept of spiritual strength, real leadership, and divine harmony. The brief account of his life serves as an invitation to dive further into the mysteries of religion. By exploring the relationship to Abraham, we can see how all of these elements work together to form a cohesive biblical account. Melchizedek makes an unexpected and significant appearance in the biblical account by meeting Abraham right after a huge victory. This episode, recounted in Genesis 14:1, takes place in the Valley of Shava, also known as the King's Valley. When Abraham returns from the war against Chedorlaomer and his companions, he is greeted by Melchizedek, the King of Salem and a priest of the Most High. This initial encounter between the two characters is rich in historical significance and meaning. Melchizedek approaches Abraham with bread and wine after rescuing his nephew Lot and recovering the stolen goods. This spiritually meaningful act of hospitality and sustenance extends well beyond gestures of kindness. Melchizedek delivers bread and wine as a sign of connection and a benediction from above in this time that transcends material necessities and connects with the spiritual. This tale underscores the importance of hospitality and sharing in divine circumstances, as it marks the start of a unique friendship between Melchizedek and Abraham. Despite its short duration, the experience is deep. Melchizedek blesses Abraham while offering him bread and wine. Abraham is declared to be blessed by God Most High, who created heaven and earth. Abraham is also blessed by God Most High, who saved him from his enemies. In addition to celebrating Abraham's victory, this blessing emphasizes God's role in both the war and Abraham's life. Melchizedek, as God's high priest, mediates between the two parties, emphasizing the relationship between them as well as the patriarch's role in salvation. The significance of Abraham's response to Melchizedek is comparable. Abraham gives Melchizedek a tenth of the retrieved stuff as a tithe. Giving to Melchizedek in this way demonstrates reverence and recognition of his spiritual authority. Tithing was traditional for priests as a symbol of appreciation and respect, but Abraham's practice with Melchizedek, a priest of a peculiar order, emphasizes Melchizedek's uniqueness and significance. This action recognizes Melchizedek's proper role as a priest and the blessing he bestows. Melchizedek's presence in the valley of Shava is perplexing because he appears in the story and then vanishes without explanation. Because nothing is mentioned about his origins or fate, there is plenty of room for speculation and creativity. Even though he only appears for a short period, Abraham develops a strong and lasting attachment with him. Their conversation serves as a historical fulcrum, illuminating the importance of faith, obedience, and acknowledgement of the divine throughout Scripture. Melchizedek's dual responsibilities as high priest and king demonstrate power that transcends time and space. By placing his blessing on Abraham, God affirms his mission and confirms his favor and protection. This interaction solidifies both Melchizedek and Abraham's status as God's chosen ones, while also emphasizing Melchizedek's tremendous spiritual and historical significance. The fact that the two leaders acknowledged one another demonstrates the importance of religion and moral leadership. The meeting takes place in the Valley of Shava, which has great spiritual and historical value. Here, the relationship between God and humanity is strengthened, and Abraham receives divine approbation and confirmation of his destiny. Melchizedek is important in this context because he serves as a middleman between Abraham and God. He accomplishes this by offering Abraham spiritual and bodily food in the form of bread and wine, as well as blessing him in the name of the Most High God. Despite his brief appearance, Melchizedek leaves an indelible mark on the biblical account. In his encounter with Abraham, where the spiritual and corporeal worlds combine, he highlights the importance of faith and moral leadership. Melchizedek, in his twin duties as high priest and king, offers a one-of-a-kind model of spiritual leadership based on an eternal and universal priesthood that transcends traditional family trees. This encounter is notable for reasons other than the historical context. Melchizedek is mentioned subsequently in both the Old and New Testaments, emphasizing his prominence and the long-lasting impact of his blessing and relationship with Abraham. This initial meeting foreshadows what is to come and symbolizes the unending link of blessing and divine promise. Melchizedek's blessing of Abraham brings delight and affirmation. This acknowledges Abraham's success as well as God's favor and presence in his life. Melchizedek's mysterious and powerful nature symbolizes justice, peace, and spiritual authority. This meeting establishes a precedent for future contacts between the divine and humans in the Bible and demonstrates the need of faith, obedience, and excellent leadership because of their meeting. Abraham and Melchizedek have provided us with an enduring legacy of leadership and faith. The Valley of Shava is a sacred spot that demonstrates the importance of spiritual and noble leadership, as well as God's blessings. Interactions between these two leaders provide a benchmark for how the divine may be present and favored throughout biblical history, as well as a point of human and divine union. Let us now examine the profound significance implicit in Melchizedek's deed of giving Abraham with food and drink. Melchizedek performs a symbolic and meaningful deed by offering Abraham bread and water. Despite their apparent simplicity, these passages have tremendous symbolic and spiritual significance that extends beyond the biblical story's immediate setting. Wine and bread provide more than just nutrition. They foresee future events of critical importance in the Judeo-Christian tradition, representing both tangible and immaterial sustenance. Bread, for example, is a widely recognized symbol of food and existence. It is mentioned several times in the Bible as a staple food that God provided for his people. The bread of the presence in the temple and the manna in the wilderness both signify God's provision and faithfulness in nurturing his people. Melchizedek not only gives Abraham something to eat after the struggle, but he also symbolically supports the idea that God will meet all of Abraham's needs by offering him bread. However, wine is more usually associated with happiness, celebration, and spiritual renewal. Wine is associated with religious and social festivals in the Old Testament, where it symbolizes favors and wealth. The wine that Melchizedek provides Abraham implies an act of spiritual regeneration and reaffirmation of relationship with God, as well as a drink to celebrate the victory. As a result, wine symbolizes happiness and God's mercy in Abraham's life. Beyond their apparent connotations, bread and wine foretell a significant time in Christian belief: Jesus' Last Supper with his disciples. Melchizedek offered this event to Abraham. On that specific occasion, Jesus established the Eucharist by referring to the elements as my body and my blood. This deed emphasizes the deep and continuing symbolism linking Melchizedek's gesture to Jesus' new covenant. Melchizedek offers these materials as a symbol of God's future covenant with humanity through Christ. Another way to interpret Melchizedek's gesture is as a symbol of hospitality and unity. The ancient Greeks and Romans saw sharing a meal as a symbol of fraternity and camaraderie. Melchizedek thanks Abraham for his accomplishment and establishes a bond of friendship and support by gifting him with food and wine. Sharing a meal brings people closer together and reminds them of the importance of spiritual and community bonds. One interpretation of Melchizedek's actions is that they validate Abraham's divine mission. Melchizedek builds Abraham's trust and assists him in charting his way for the future by acknowledging and confirming his trip with bread and wine. This acknowledgement is significant for the course of the biblical account and the fulfillment of divine promises, since it underscores Abraham's journey on a route blessed by God. Bread and wine, two seemingly basic products, hold great symbolic value. The biblical context provides these elements spiritual importance beyond their alimentary function, yet they are vital and basic in many communities. They are crucial components of every believer's faith life because they symbolize divine provision, community, and promise. Melchizedek contributes to this rich tradition of symbolism and meaning by giving these aspects. This deed further demonstrates the relationship between the material and metaphysical components of a believer's life. In the same way that bread and wine nourish the body, God feeds the soul. This parallel illustrates the relationship between the material and ethereal realms, emphasizing biblical religion's all-encompassing outlook. Melchizedek exemplifies this bond and the reality that heavenly care is all-encompassing by providing these items. That is why the materials of communion, bread and wine, are constant reminders of God's love and nourishment. The fact that God preserved and blessed Abraham shows us that we too can have faith in God's dependability. This timeless symbolism transcends the specific story and is applicable to believers of all ages, providing a source of encouragement and optimism. Furthermore, the bread and wine that Melchizedek presented to Abraham for the first occasion may have been a foreshadowing of the future blessings that were promised him. One of these blessings is the promise of a fertile country with a large number of children. Participating in the sacrament of communion provides Abraham with a taste of God's promises, as well as a physical proof of his faithfulness. Melchizedek demonstrates how confident we can be that God's promises will be fulfilled. Furthermore, Melchizedek's act of delivering bread and wine to Abraham connects the Old and New Testaments. In the letter to the Hebrews, he is mentioned again as a type of Christ, an eternal priest who foreshadows Jesus' priesthood. The relationship between Melchizedek and Jesus shows the biblical story's multifaceted nature and the tremendous meaning that can be found in seemingly minor elements. Melchizedek established the symbolic use of bread and wine, which Jesus completes by linking the past, present, and future in an unbreakable covenant of trust and promise. Let us now analyze the relevance of Melchizedek's blessing to Abraham and how it influences the spiritual and scriptural account. The blessing that Melchizedek bestows on Abraham is one of the most crucial moments in the biblical account, emphasizing the fundamental connection between people and divine forces. Melchizedek validates Abraham's heavenly destiny and acknowledges his victory in war by blessing him. Given Melchizedek's status as a priest of God the Most High, this blessing is a profoundly significant spiritual act. Melchizedek bestows an evident benediction. The Almighty, who created the universe and everything in it, bestowed benefits on Abraham for saving you from harm by sending your rivals into your hands. This announcement holds enormous significance. To begin, it emphasizes the special link between Abraham and the Creator by recognizing Abraham as God's favorite and chosen one. All pause. Melchizedek strengthens the argument that all of Abraham's accomplishments were gifts from God by praising God for Abraham's victory. Melchizedek's blessing confirms Abraham's legitimacy, as well as God's faithfulness to his promises. Here we see the fulfillment of God's promises to Abraham, which included a fertile country and numerous progeny. Melchizedek's act as a priest enhances Abraham's faith by delivering God's benediction. This act of blessing represents a watershed point in Abraham's spiritual journey, since it provides him the strength to complete his goal. This blessing will affect Abraham as well as his descendants. Melchizedek's blessing resonates throughout Judeo-Christian history and the Israelite chronicles. Trusting in God's promises is essential, and this is a constant reminder of that. Melchizedek, a man with spiritual authority, provides heavenly confirmation that extends beyond Abraham's life and into future generations. Intercession from above is critical, as Melchizedek's blessing to Abraham demonstrates. Melchizedek exemplifies the priest's vital function as a mediator between God and men, as he has the authority to bless and intervene on God's behalf. Intercession is crucial for maintaining one's faith and relationship with God. Thus, Melchizedek's blessing is part of a larger pattern of prayer and blessings found throughout the Bible. The narrative of Melchizedek and Abraham demonstrates how God's favor is available to everyone. The fact that Melchizedek, who is neither an Israelite nor a member of Abraham's household, recognizes and blesses Abraham proves that God's favor has no limitations. The Bible highlights this universal fact numerous times, emphasizing that anybody who pursues God with sincere faith and sincerity will receive his love and blessing. Abraham's attitude toward the blessing is equally crucial. By accepting Melchizedek's blessing, Abraham demonstrates humility and respects his spiritual might. Recognizing God's presence in his victories and life, he joyfully takes the blessing. This admission and acceptance is an important component of Abraham's religious journey, since it shows his desire to follow heavenly guidance and accept spiritual instruction. This period of grace also foreshadows future promises and covenants from on high. One interpretation of Melchizedek's blessing on Abraham is that it foreshadows God's covenant with Abraham, in which God promises land and a large number of descendants. Melchizedek's benediction confirms God's will while also setting the framework for the covenant, which would be defined later. The continuity of God's promises and the biblical story are strongly influenced by the link between blessing and covenant. Theologically, Melchizedek's blessing on Abraham is extremely significant. Melchizedek is described as a man who came before Christ, the eternal high priest, in the New Testament, specifically in the letter to the Hebrews. Melchizedek's benediction to Abraham foreshadows Christ's eternal blessing for all Christians. Drawing parallels between Melchizedek and Christ reveals that the blessing is broad and significant, with far-reaching ramifications for the present and future. The biblical account of Melchizedek's blessing highlights Melchizedek's moral and spiritual authority. He has the authority to bless and intervene on God's behalf, in addition to being a political leader. Abraham acknowledges this authority and displays gratitude and respect in return. Spiritual strength is valued and respected in the biblical tradition, as evidenced by the interactions of the two leaders. Melchizedek's benediction to Abraham concludes with a powerful vision of faith, obedience, and recognition of heavenly authority. The importance of spiritual supplication and heavenly favor is emphasized at this point in the biblical account. Melchizedek reinforces his purpose by bestowing his blessing on Abraham, leaving a legacy that continues to inspire and encourage believers' faith. To underscore the eternal and worldwide aspect of Jesus' priesthood, consider how Melchizedek is viewed as a type of Christ. Melchizedek appears in the Old Testament before returning triumphantly in the New Testament, where his position is amplified even further. When it comes to the everlasting and international priesthood, he is frequently compared to Jesus Christ. Melchizedek is portrayed as a forerunner of Christ, the eternal high priest, in the letter to the Hebrews, which highlights this relationship. Melchizedek and Jesus Christ are linked by their peculiar and distinguishing characteristics. It's easy to understand how Melchizedek's titles, King of Righteousness and King of Peace, relate to Jesus. In addition, he has no beginning, middle, or end to his story. He is simply a priest. This description helps to better understand the Christologically fundamental quality of his priesthood, which is eternal in nature. Like Melchizedek, Jesus is an everlasting priest whose priesthood is founded on divine rather than human traditions. This link is extensively emphasized in the letter to the Hebrews, where it is said that Jesus is a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. In contrast to the Levitical priests, Jesus Christ's priesthood is eternal and unchanging. One of the most significant beliefs of Christianity is that the priesthood exists indefinitely, which means that Christians can always turn to Jesus for assistance in times of need. Melchizedek's priesthood is also worldwide, which corresponds to Jesus' mission. Melchizedek was not confined to any nation or group of people. Everyone who seeks God may join his priesthood. Jesus came to redeem certain people, but he also came to intervene on behalf of everyone. The New Testament emphasizes that all people are involved in God's plan of salvation, which is a central idea of universality. The Last Supper of Jesus Christ bears striking similarities to Melchizedek's offering of bread and wine. During the Last Supper, Jesus established the Eucharist by identifying the bread as his flesh and the wine as his blood. The clear relationship between the two incidents demonstrates the symbolism's intricacy and continuity. Melchizedek's act of delivering bread and wine to Abraham anticipated the new covenant established by Jesus Christ via his death and resurrection. One view is that Melchizedek's benediction to Abraham represents the blessing that Jesus will bestow onto all mankind. Melchizedek blesses Abraham in the name of the Most High God, recognizing his heavenly mission and triumph. In a similar vein, Jesus bestows his benefits on those who believe in him, giving them eternal life in union with God. This gift connects the Old and New Testaments, revealing how God's objective of saving people remains consistent. The Melchizedek and Jesus priesthoods share an important characteristic. Neither requires a human lineage or succession, because they were both ordained directly by God. This direct ordination demonstrates that their priesthoods are divinely founded rather than dependent on human organizations, so strengthening their legitimacy and authority. The letter to the Hebrews emphasizes Jesus' sovereignty over the Levitical priesthood. Furthermore, like Jesus, Melchizedek transcends his culture's theological and cultural boundaries. Melchizedek appears to be a priest of a different order, unrelated with Israel's long-standing customs. He embodies the holy message's comprehensive and universal nature, and thus serves as a priest for all. The message of Jesus Christ, who came to earth to preach salvation to all people, regardless of race, religion, or social status, likewise cut across religious and cultural lines. Melchizedek's story foreshadows Jesus' dual status as high priest and king, because of the unique way in which he blends these duties. In addition to being dubbed the King of Kings, Jesus is also known as the high priest, who intercedes on our behalf before God. This dual purpose, which combines temporal authority with spiritual importance, is both unique and vital. Melchizedek demonstrates this type of unity by juggling the duties of king and priest, and Jesus Christ is the ultimate example of this union. Parency. Melchizedek, like Jesus, lacks a precise genealogy. Although the Gospels provide Jesus' familial lineage, it is not required to comprehend his priesthood. His priesthood, like Melchizedek's, is eternal and divinely established. The absence of a specific priestly lineage emphasizes the unique and divine nature of both priesthoods, implying that they were formed and maintained by God himself. Finally, the relationship between Melchizedek and Jesus emphasizes that God's redemption plan is all-encompassing and eternal. Despite his limited appearance in the biblical narrative, Melchizedek had a significant impact. He prefigures Christ by emphasizing the depth and continuity of God's redemptive purpose. Jesus, as high priest in the Melchizedek priesthood, both fulfills and exceeds this prophecy by giving an everlasting and universal salvation. Melchizedek's dual role as king and priest of Salem distinguishes him and makes him theologically noteworthy. Melchizedek is a one-of-a-kind figure in the Bible, serving as both king and priest of Salem. This distinctive and intense combination emphasizes his significant role and spiritual significance. Melchizedek's significance in biblical and spiritual history is enhanced by his role as both the spiritual and political leader of Salem, which is frequently confused with Jerusalem. As Salem's ruler, Melchizedek wields acknowledged and cherished temporal power. The city of Salem, whose name means peace, represents fairness and calm. Melchizedek, known as the King of Righteousness, displays these leadership traits. As king, his major role is to promote justice and peace in his city, rather than simply exercising political authority. To understand his role and the lasting impact he had on biblical tradition, one must first grasp this balance of peace and justice. Melchizedek's priestly duty was significant. His title, Priest of the Most High God, reflects his close relationship with God. Melchizedek's function as high priest allows him to pray for the people, make sacrifices, and bestow blessings. His unique priestly vocation exemplifies a universal and everlasting priesthood, because it is not based on Levitical ancestry, but rather on a divine command. Melchizedek is a unique person because of his combined role as king and priest. In biblical tradition, the roles of a monarch in terms of political authority and a priest in terms of spiritual leadership were usually maintained separate. Melchizedek, on the other hand, is a one-man show combining spiritual and temporal leadership functions. The odd combination foreshadows Jesus Christ's eventual kingdom and high priesthood. Melchizedek's leadership transforms Salem into a symbol of righteousness and peace, reflecting the ideas he represents. The fact that Salem is tied with Jerusalem adds to its significance, as the city would go on to become a political and spiritual powerhouse for Israelites and later Christians. Melchizedek's function as ruler of Salem foreshadows Jerusalem's eventual status as a sacred city. Melchizedek's lack of a specific family tree is one of his distinguishing characteristics. Unlike the exhaustively documented lineages of many ancient individuals, the Bible makes no mention of Melchizedek's predecessors or descendants. This would imply that his role as king and priest is divinely appointed and unrelated to human traditions. This lack of a family tree alludes to the eternal nature of his priesthood, a theme that is revisited in relation to Jesus in the New Testament. Melchizedek's prominence is enhanced by the fact that he was close to Abraham. Melchizedek's blessing affirms his spiritual power while also acknowledging Abraham's divine mission. By accepting Melchizedek's tithe offer and blessing him, Abraham acknowledges Melchizedek's position as God Almighty's priest. The biblical account's critical encounter between the two leaders emphasizes the importance of spiritual leadership and heavenly blessing. The figure of Melchizedek appears several times in the Bible, most notably in the letter to the Hebrews, to emphasize the elevated rank of Jesus' priesthood. This parallel exalts Melchizedek while clarifying the core of Christ's priesthood. Jesus, like Melchizedek, is an immortal priest, appointed directly by God rather than through human ancestry. This link emphasizes Melchizedek's symbolism and the unbroken chain of the divine design. Melchizedek's twin positions as king and priest exemplify spiritually good administration. He shows the kind of leadership that fosters peace and prosperity by acting with integrity and justice. Melchizedek, an authoritative character who blends temporal and spiritual power, provides a moral and effective example of leadership. This principle has stood the test of time, and it continues to teach leaders valuable lessons. Melchizedek, who owned both kingdom and priesthood, represents a sort of future leader who will also serve in this dual capacity. Jesus Christ perfectly fulfills the messianic expectation by living out and going above and beyond the predictions contained in Melchizedek's form. In his dual responsibilities as high priest and king, Jesus Christ offers instruction in all aspects of human living, both spiritual and temporal. The subsequent treatment of Melchizedek in the Bible underscores his importance. His character is brought up again and expanded upon, particularly in the New Testament writings, which give him considerably more attention. Melchizedek's theological significance and significant influence are evidenced by his continued relevance throughout the Bible. He represents principles that transcend time and geography. Thus, he is more than just a historical character. Finally, Melchizedek portrays an integrated image of spiritual and temporal leadership in his capacity as Salem's king and priest. He defies traditional classification. He stands out as a distinct and prominent figure in the biblical account because of his rank as a priest of the Most High God, his blessing of Abraham, and the lack of a clear genealogy. Melchizedek foreshadows Jesus Christ's future leadership, whose eternal and global priesthood fulfills and exceeds Melchizedek's ideal of justice, peace, and spiritual authority. Thus, Melchizedek's tale serves as a link between the Old and New Testaments, painting a consistent and detailed picture of God's plan for salvation and equitable governance. Melchizedek, an enigmatic figure, leads us on a trip that connects the Old and New Testaments, while emphasizing the importance of spiritual and equitable leadership. Melchizedek, as Salem's king and priest, provides a unique leadership paradigm that combines righteousness, calm, and faith. His words to Abraham, the eating of bread and wine, and his blessing all have eternal importance and point directly to the act of Jesus Christ. Melchizedek teaches us the importance of believing in God's promises and praying for others. He reinforces the everlasting and universal nature of the salvation plan through his role as an eternal priest, which foreshadows Christ's priesthood. This prophecy is fulfilled by Jesus, who gives redemption to all as a Melchizedek priest. Melchizedek gave Christ's blessing on Abraham, which provides spiritual nourishment and the promise of eternal life. Melchizedek's story serves as a powerful reminder of God's stability and the need of following his counsel in our daily lives. This is the question I have for you today. What ways can you apply these lessons on faith and just leadership in your daily life? Is God's blessing and purpose for your life something you're willing to embrace? Reflecting on Melchizedek's story can provide you with new insights into your own spiritual journey. If you want to learn more about deep and illuminating themes, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Join us as we explore new territories and grow spiritually. Join me as we delve into the Scripture's richness of knowledge and seek new ways to apply these truths to our lives.